Well, first of all, I'm just glad to be here. And I want to talk a little bit about the politics of hope, which is something that I think it either makes possible or impossible all the change we've been talking about. We've been talking a lot about change and changes that we want, but there's a precondition for change, which is hope, the belief that we can actually get there. And what I want to touch on is, where did the hope go? What happened to the hope? We saw this incredible flowering of this politics of hope in our country in 2008. I don't know if people remember, this is a long time ago. But every now and again, I go on YouTube and I look at those at election night, Grant Park, and those faces, every color under the sun, looking up, tears on everybody's cheeks. Or I'll look at the inauguration and people around the world. So much hope, a politics of hope that flourished in 2008 and then seemed to completely collapse in 2009 and is now being reborn in 2010 all across the country, including in this room. What was that? What is that? What I want to suggest is that there's a process here that we're going through. When you run a campaign, you're trying to move people from despair to hope. And then when you govern, you're trying to go from hope to change. Now, in your personal life, you know how tough this is. I will confess, I'm about 15 pounds overweight right now. And I ate about 10 cookies. That's called despair, right? That's despair. I'm just never going to get in shape again. But then every now and again, I see somebody looks, kind of fit or cute like Peter or something like that, and Paul Hawken. And I think to myself, I could look like that again, That's called hope, right? Actually losing the 15 pounds, that's change, right? And that's a lot harder, right? It goes back and forth. It goes up and down. So you have good days, you have bad days. And that's kind of where we are right now. We're kind of in this process now of the change. But what you know is that you'll never actually get to the change if you give up hope. If the change gets hard and you go back from the hope into the despair, you never get to the change. So the question is, where did the hope go? And part of the problem is people forgot where the hope came from. And I really want to bring this up with you here because of what's happening here, which is so hopeful. See, President Obama gets driven crazy by this one fallacy, which is the source of almost all of his problems and most of ours, which is that he was the source of the hope, which he's always rejected, hates and can't stand, right? Because he knows the truth and tries to tell people, nobody listens to him. He's not the source of the hope. If you want to know where the hope went, you have to understand where it came from. It came from us. It came from ordinary people. We forget that. Where did the hope come from? 2003, an unjust war being launched in our country, our Constitution being shredded in plain sight, and with no leader, no big organization, millions of people took to the streets. The process that took almost a decade with Vietnam took months in this country. The New York Times called us the second superpower, world public opinion. Right? We weren't able to stop the war. That pro-democracy movement, though, immediately went over into the election campaign in 2004. And we had a good candidate, but he wasn't some charismatic superhero. Didn't matter. We came within 100,000 votes in Ohio of evicting a wartime president. Why? Because of ordinary people standing up. They weren't saying we're with the Democratic Party or even the candidate. They said we're standing up for our country. Lost. Katrina hits 2005. People said we just can't stand it anymore. And by 2006, we broke one-party authoritarian rule, shattered it in our country. One of the most impressive pro-democracy movements in the history of the world, with no leader, no one organization, just the people. And it was that series of victories, that process of building a pro-democracy movement in our own country opposed to authoritarianism that inspired a senator, freshman senator, to do something foolish and say there's something in our country that's stronger and bigger and more beautiful and more powerful than the Democratic Party, than the biggest brands in politics, the Clintons and the McCains. There's something bigger than that. And I want to go and be a part of it and help to lead it and give it voice. We inspired him first. We inspired him first. So if there's a hope gap or an inspiration gap, I think it's fair to say it lies with us. And we spent a year misreading a slogan. I remember in 2008, I don't remember anybody saying anything but, yes, we can. Yes, we can. All last year it was, yes, he can. And then, maybe he can't. And then, where's my hope? And all of these people who built the biggest, most exciting, diverse, racially and class-wise pro-democracy movement on the planet started munching popcorn and watching television to figure out what's going to happen tomorrow, treating the President of the United States as if he's the center of everything in their lives, and stopped working. And I didn't see anybody in the streets after the inauguration in Washington, D.C. for a year, except people who were opposed. And I want to point that out because what that means, what that implies, is that most of the suffering we've gone through for the past year is not necessary.